IBW Local 347. When I graduated high school, I went to Iowa State University to become an engineer. I believe that, like millions of new students entering college each year, that the degree would be worth the high costs. But after a year and a half, I started to reconsider. I took a year off to consider whether being an engineer was worth decades of paying off student debt. While searching for a career that fit, I went to work full-time at a production facility in Osceola, Iowa. I stumbled upon the Des Moines Electrical Apprenticeship, and soon after I started working for a union contractor as a helper and joined the IBEW. Since I joined my union, I have learned about how unions stand up for the working class and how they fight to ensure benefits and safe working conditions, but most importantly, how they give power back to the workers who have built the world's greatest economy. I have deeply studied the history of the labor movement, which has shown me how strong unions can be when their people organize and stand together. However, unions have been under attack all over the United States by Republican legislatures backed by their corporate lobbyists, and membership is currently on the decline, with only 6% of private sector employees belonging to a union. Without a strong base of members, unions cannot effectively bargain for better compensation and are instead trying to protect what they already have, which in turn makes it harder to bring in new members. When these factors come together, unions have a much harder time going up against corporations, which have become empowered to bust unions and stop any attempts from employees to form unions in the first place. Under our current system, the rate of unionization will likely continue to drop, and workers' rights as we know them today will become a thing of the past. Don't let this discourage you, though. There is a way to empower and revitalize unions to restore them to their former glory. There is a grassroots campaign happening right now in the United States that is working tirelessly to empower the working class instead of taking money and advice from corporate donors or the billionaire class. There's a grassroots movement that wants to crack down on big businesses like McDonald's and Walmart for their union busting. There's a grassroots campaign that aims to help all current and future workers, those that are members of unions and those that are not, by increasing the standards of living for all Americans. There's a grassroots campaign that says it's for the working class and actually means it. There's a grassroots campaign that believes in justice is not a radical idea. This campaign belongs to none other than Senator Bernie Sanders. Bernie has proposed a 21st century economic Bill of Rights, which would recognize that all Americans deserve a decent job, a living wage, access to quality health care, access to education, and access to affordable housing. He understands that real change comes from mass movements, not from the heads of corporations, lobbyists, or individual politicians. It is time for us as union workers and as Americans to stand up for our rights, and those rights should include being able to freely unionize, to be able to get a living wage from any full-time job, and to be able to live in houses that we can raise our children in. We need to finish what FDR started when he proposed Social Security, Medicare, and the Works Progress Administration, which put millions of unemployed people to work by building and maintaining infrastructure like roads and public buildings. FDR was demonized by Democrats and Republicans alike when he introduced the New Deal, but he stood up for what was right instead of adhering to party lines. Senator Bernie Sanders is picking up FDR's mantle and is calling for a fair deal for all Americans. We have the power to expand workers' rights by rewriting the narrative about unions, forming new unions, and encouraging solidarity among the working class. But we can't do it alone. In order to enact the change we wish to see, we need to form a mass movement. We need to stand up for bold, progressive ideas that will not only reshape the economy, but also the life of every American worker. We need to join Bernie Sanders and the largest grassroots campaign in history to ensure that no American should live in poverty due to starvation wages. Thank you.
Amen.
Hello, I'm Deborah Marlin from Preston, Iowa. I've been a small business owner for 18 years and previously a registered nurse. I know the healthcare system from many different angles. I've seen firsthand how it has failed so many in my community and bankrupted many others. I'm here for my fellow Iowans, my brother, and my good friend Michael Padavina. Healthcare is a human right. It is also an economic right. Here are a few examples of why I believe that. The chief of police in a small town here in southwest Iowa had to delay his retirement approximately 6 years and take a loan out for $35,000 to get an urgent dental procedure done. David, a community member who's fighting cancer, needed critical dental work done and didn't have the finances to do that. After delaying dental care, part of his jawbone had to be removed, and he also had to delay his cancer treatments until his dental care was complete. Gail, a mid-50s gentleman who suffered a stroke, had to fight to get on disability to get health coverage. Though he can hardly verbalize his words, and he has residual disability from the stroke. This week, he went to go get a simple shingles vaccine, but that's not covered on disability, though it is covered on most private insurances. For years, I've seen the injustices of the healthcare system, especially for single adults, such as when my twin became sick from viral encephalitis. I could tell you of many injustices through his journey. He was lucky to survive, only to be in a healthcare system where he could not get a brain biopsy because he didn't have the right insurance. He committed suicide a few weeks after our 45th birthday. We have a broken, inconsistent healthcare system.
Amen.
It's a system that works for the rich and well-connected, and a system that falls short for the poor, undocumented, and folks in the LGBTQ spectrum. Healthcare is an economic right and a human right, where a person should not need to depend on their work, their marital status, age, or economic status to maintain quality health coverage. Here in rural Iowa, people are silently suffering while being economically disadvantaged and left behind. More than 50% of the kids in our community are on free and reduced lunch shamed because their families are too poor to feed them. Families are living in inadequate housing, struggling to keep a roof over their heads. They are so poor at times they can't even afford to move away for opportunities. According to news reports, Iowa's economy is booming, but for whom? I don't see the wealth reflected in my community. One young family I know, parents who work full-time, they work opposite shifts to care for their 2 young children. They have a roof over their heads and food to eat, but for years, each of the parents have made a monthly trip to donate plasma, a weekly trip to donate plasma for disposable income. Go stand and talk with those in the food pantry line, like my mother did the other day when she was volunteering. It is very enlightening to hear their life stories. There is a reason why they're in line, and it's not because they're lazy. It's time Iowa Nice turns into Iowa Right. We need to stand up and do what's right for all people. No one should profit from the pain and sickness of others. We as a nation need to stand up and reject the greed of the for-profit healthcare system, the for-profit prisons, and the Wall Street speculators. We need a president with the moral compass unchanging and unyielding to the pressures of the executive office. We need a fighter. We need someone who will give a damn about working families and the working poor right here in Iowa.
Yeah.
I support Senator Bernie Sanders because he gives a damn about people like us.
Hello everyone, my name is Sue Buffy. I'm an unemployed IT worker and in Iowa. My first husband, Tom, and I moved to a farm in northeast Nebraska after I graduated from college with a bachelor's of education degree. Together we cultivated corn, soybeans, oats, and hay, along with a farrow-to-finish livestock operation. To help supplement our family income, I did substitute teaching whenever I could. The farm crisis in the 1980s put a lot of stress on families all across the country, especially families like mine here in the heartland. High interest rates, falling land values, and low commodity prices forced us both to jobs outside of the farm. I went to work at a group home for adults with developmental disabilities, and Tom went to work for a locally owned grain bin construction company where he was eventually killed on the job due to the building collapsing while he was in the trench. It took me 2 years to settle the outstanding bills and debts for the estate, with the exception of the Farmers Home Administration, the government lender of last resort, which held a second mortgage on a quarter of the farm ground we were purchasing. I signed over all the land and our home to the mortgage holders. I moved to Iowa to attend Indian Hills Community College. I graduated with a degree in computer programming. Recruiters came from many companies. I chose to accept the offer from the Principal Financial Group in Des Moines because of their reputation and the recruiter's assurance that the company never laid anyone off, not even during the Great Depression. I was notified by the U.S. government of their intention to start collection action regarding the $30,000 in farmer's home loan remaining on Tom's estate. After consulting with an attorney, I filed bankruptcy. In January of 2011, I was laid off from the principal due to my position being eliminated when the office was closed. I was 55 and concluding treatment for breast cancer. I was old, I was sick, and I was expensive. Since the layoff, I found sporadic work, usually in contracting roles, at the company that laid me off. My husband works at Walmart for $11.50 an hour. We have our health insurance through his work, where we have a $6,000 family deductible and a $13,000 out-of-pocket maximum for our family. I've worked hard my entire life, as a farmer, school teacher, IT professional, and now as a contractor. The economy has been booming, but working class people like me and millions of others across the country and Iowa have been left behind. We want a fair deal. And now it's my privilege to introduce the next President of the United States.
Thank you all. Everybody know Jane? Thank you.
Our hero.
It is a pleasure to be with you today. I come, as you know, from one of the most rural states in the United States. And in Vermont, we have done town meetings in towns of even fewer people than Orient. But it does look like we have most of Orient with us today, and I thank you all. And I'm also honored to be here at Henry Wallace's birthplace. I think in Iowa, you know Henry Wallace. Well, I'm not sure that the American people do. I think he's a political figure, one of the giants of the mid-20th century, who has kind of been pushed out of national political discussion. But you should be very proud of somebody who is many, many years ahead of his time.
Check out WikiLeaks.
We are. Here's John. John Nichols here. There's John. John is a writer for The Nation and a good friend. And John was just telling me, and I didn't know this, that one of the reasons Wallace was not renominated in 1944 was because of his opposition to racism. And the segregationists in the Democratic Party did not want him around. So his values speak well to the values of Iowa. And I want to thank the folks here for allowing us to use this beautiful, beautiful facility. What I want to do today, I'm going to speak for a little while, and then we'll open up the discussion. I'll ask you questions, and you ask me questions, and we'll go from there. And I want to begin by thanking the people of Iowa. Because when I came here 4 years ago, many of the ideas that I talked about at that point seemed very, very radical and kind of extreme. Well, it turned out that they were not so radical or extreme for the people of Iowa. We did very, very well in the caucuses. By the way, we intend to win the caucus this time. The ideas that we brought forth, which 4 years ago seemed radical, today are kind of mainstream, aren't they? So 4 years ago we came here and we said, you know what? If you work 40 hours a week in America, you should not be living in poverty. Not such a radical idea. And we talked about raising the minimum wage to at least $15 an hour, making sure that workers who wanted to join a union would be able to do so. Well, 4 years have come and gone, and that radical and extreme idea has now been adopted by 7 states in this country. And as you know, a few weeks ago, the U.S. House of Representatives voted to raise that minimum wage $15 an hour. 4 years ago, I introduced an idea, which again, at that point seemed very radical. I said, look, the world is changing, the economy is changing, technology is changing, and the idea of a K through 12 educational system, free public education, is great, but the world is changing. We have to expand that idea.
Amen.
Everybody here knows that if our kids are going to make it into the middle class, in most instances, they need a higher education, okay? And what we said 4 years ago is we've got to make public colleges and universities tuition free. Well, that idea was attacked by editorial pages all over America, too radical, too extreme, can't happen. Well, 4 years have come and gone, and in California, in New York State, in Tennessee, in places all over this country, there is major movement toward making public colleges and universities tuition free. And I'm happy to say the New York University School of Medicine has said that they will be tuition free so that our doctors don't have to graduate with $300,000-$400,000 in debt. We're making progress on that issue. 4 years ago, I said there is something absurd that we are punishing the young people of this country who we told to go out and get a higher education, and now they're ending up with $50,000, $100,000 in student debt, and that we have to deal with that issue. And once again, I was told, wow, you can't do that, that's too radical an idea. Today, all over the country, that is exactly what people are talking about, and in my view, we should cancel all student debt in this country.
Absolutely.
And once again, that idea of canceling all student debt is met with a continuous pattern of opposition from the entire establishment. How can you do that? Well, I'll tell you how we can do that and why we should do it. Turns out that the younger generation today, for the first time in the modern history of America, will have a lower standard of living than their parents. Got that? See, here we are in the so-called booming economy, but our kids leaving school deeply in debt. They're going out and getting jobs that in real dollars pay less than what their parents earn. They can't buy a home. They can't afford to have kids in some instances. So I think it is appropriate to cancel all student debt, and we pay for that by imposing a modest tax on Wall Street speculation.
Yeah.
4 years ago, I was asked at a national debate, televised debate, what the major foreign policy crisis facing our country was. And I think the moderator expected me to say, well, it's Al-Qaeda, it's ISIS, and those would be reasonable answers. But what I said is that the major national security crisis we face is climate change. People are not listening crazy on the well. They're not laughing at that answer anymore. Because as you know, the scientists have told us that we need to act very, very aggressively, or else some terrible things that could happen in our country and around the world. So, my point is, I want to thank all of you, because Iowa was the first state, and is the first state, to vote in the caucus or primary process. And we brought those ideas to Iowa, and you told the world that these ideas were not radical ideas, were not un-American ideas, but were exactly what we need for this country. So I want to thank all of you for your support for those ideas in my candidacy. So today, 4 years have come and gone, and this is where we are as a nation. And it is important for us to think outside of the box. I think the main point that I want to make to everybody is that the only time real change takes place, and I mean real change, is when we change political consciousness in this country that we don't necessarily say what appeared on television yesterday, that we think things through ourselves. That each one of us goes into our own hearts and our own minds and says, what is going on in America today? So let me just tell you what I think. I'm going to ask you what you think. And I don't want you to tell me, what you think I believe. I want you to tell me, what's in your own hearts. So we start off with an issue that is talked about very, very rarely. And in all humility, I think if I had not pushed this issue, it would probably not be talked about at all. And that is from a moral and economic perspective. How do we feel that in America today we have 3 people owning more wealth than the bottom half of the American society? 3 people. How do we feel that the top 1% owns more wealth than the bottom 92%? How do we feel that in a time when in Iowa and in Vermont and all over this country you got working people who are forced to work 2 or 3 jobs, work 50, 60, 70 hours a week, 49% of all of the new income coming in goes to the top 1%. Now I want you to think about 2 things. I want you to think about the economic impact of that, the morality of that, and then maybe the more important question is, why don't we discuss that? Why don't we discuss that? And, think about that. Maybe we can discuss that in a moment. And then when you talk about income and wealth inequality, you also talk about you have to think about a corrupt political system. And what does that mean? What it means is that these folks who have many, many billions of dollars do not put their money under the mattress. What they do in order to perpetuate their wealth and their power is they spend that money on the political process. And as a result of this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision, billionaires can now spend hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to elect candidates who represent the wealthy and the powerful and not you. And that's called a corrupt political system. So what you got here is economically an incredibly grotesque and unfair distribution of wealth and income. Politically, you got billionaires buying election and want to perpetuate the system. And let me give you some concrete examples of what that means. 4 years ago when I came to Iowa, I said that, maybe, just maybe, the United States of America should be doing what every other major country on earth does, and that is to guarantee health care to all people as a human right. And people said, oh no, the American people will never go for that, it's a terrible idea, and I give you 50 different reasons why it was not a good idea. Well, guess what's happened? 4 years, and gone. Poll after poll after poll tells us the American people now support a Medicare for all single-payer program. I want you to think about this for a moment. And that is, how does it happen that we have a healthcare system today where 87 million Americans are uninsured or underinsured? What do I mean by underinsured? Help me out here. What does it mean to be underinsured?
Coverage is crap.
Your coverage is crap. That is one way of phrasing it.
Giant deductible.
What does that mean, your coverage is crap? What?
High co-pays and high deductibles.
Exactly. All right. Anybody here? And again, I don't talk to me about your deductibles. What are the deductibles of something that you are dealing with as a family? Anyone want to talk about that? Okay. Well, there are many Americans who have deductibles of $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $7,000 a year or more. So if you don't have a lot of money and you got a deductible of $5,000, what happens when you get sick? You don't go to the doctor. And lo and behold, we got 30,000 people in this country who die every single year because they don't go to a doctor. And then if you have a health insurance program, a health insurance policy that is crap, and God forbid you end up in the hospital, and you run up a bill of a few $100,000, what happens to you then? That's right. That's exactly right. 500,000 people a year in the United States of America go bankrupt because of medical bills. See, now we don't talk about these issues. So let's look at the healthcare system. 87 million people, uninsured or underinsured, can't go to the doctor when they should. 30,000 die. People end up in the hospital with large medical bills. 500,000 people go bankrupt. In terms of prescription drugs, which is obviously an integral part of healthcare today, 1 out of 5 Americans who get a prescription from their doctor because they are sick cannot afford to fill that prescription. Some of you may have noted that 2 weeks ago today, actually it was Sunday, I went from Detroit to Windsor, Ontario with a group of diabetics from the Midwest. And the point that I wanted to make is that the cost of insulin, which diabetics, 7.5 million diabetics use in this country, is outrageously high in America. We went to Windsor, Ontario. Anyone know the differential? What people paid by going to Canada? What was it?
About 10%
Exactly.
of what we pay here.
It was 1/10 the price. Can you imagine? Insulin is oxygen for diabetics. This is what they need to stay alive. And what I learned on that trip, which I had not known, is that 1 out of 4 people who use insulin in America, about 7.5 million people do, are rationing their insulin. There was a young man on the trip, a guy was a football player, had been a football player. He chose not to tell his parents that he was rationing insulin because they were already spending so much money, and he felt guilty about it. Can you imagine? And he became sick. And that's what happens when you ration insulin. In fact, there are people who are dying in America because they cannot afford the insulin they need. But it is not just insulin. You name the drug, and it is less expensive not only in Canada, but in countries all over the world. So you got a healthcare system and a pharmaceutical industry. What is the function of those industries? Who wants to help me out here? Make money. So, at a time when so many people are uninsured or underinsured, when we pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs, that's the bad news about the system. Let me give you the good news from the healthcare industry's perspective. The good news is that the profits of the insurance companies are soaring, and last year the top 5 companies made $23 billion in profit. Last year, the top 10 drug companies in America made $69 billion in profit.
A year, yes.
A year, 1 year. All right. So you have a system whose function is not complicated. The function of the current system is to make huge profits for the drug companies and the insurance companies, to pay out incredible compensation packages for the CEOs of those companies. That's its function. And it is in fact working very well for the industry. Together, made $100 billion in profit last year, while so many of our people are uninsured, underinsured, or can't afford prescription drugs. And the American people are catching on. And more, poll after poll shows that the American people now want us to move to a Medicare for all single-payer program. Now, it is impossible, in my view, for anybody to defend this functionality of the current system. We are spending, once again, twice as much per capita on healthcare as do the people of other industrialized countries, Canada, etc. And yet so many people are uninsured or underinsured. So what is the problem? Why haven't we moved to a more rational healthcare system? And I'll tell you what the problem is, and you all know what the problem is. The problem is that in an industry that made $100 billion last year in profits, they will do everything they possibly can to protect those profits. They will spend, mark my words, hundreds of millions of dollars in lies and distortions and personal attacks against me and other folks who are supporting single payer to do everything they can to make sure we do not move to Medicare for all. That's what we're up against. So this is not a debate about health care, because nobody can defend the current system. This is a question about whether we have the willingness to take on the incredible power of the insurance companies and the drug companies. And the good news is the American people are prepared to take them on. And no matter how much money they spend, no matter how many lies they tell, we will pass a Medicare for all single payer. What I'm told by my opponents and by the industry and by editorial writers, everybody in the world, is look, this is, you really can't, this is too big. You know, it's going to be convulsive to the system. You know, people love their private health insurance. All of you love your private health insurance? I don't think you do. What people love, in many cases, if you got a good doctor, you love your doctor. If you had a good experience in a hospital, you appreciate that experience. You may like the clinic you're going to. You like the people who are providing health care to you if they're doing a good job. Very few people I know are in love with their health care industry.
Amen.
All right?
Amen.
All right. So then they say, well, you know, people love their private insurance, you know, and they get confused about it. Every single year, 50 million people change their private insurance. How does that happen? You leave your job, you get a new job. Guess what? You got a new insurance program. You quit your job. You don't have any insurance. You go into Medicaid. It's a new insurance program. Your employer changes your health insurance plan. All right? Anybody work for an employer who said, oh, by the way, we got a better deal over here. We're changing our health insurance program. And one of the problems there is that sometimes the doctors that you want to go to may not be in the new network, insurance network that you are taken into. So let me be very clear and lay out what Medicare for All means. Number one, under Medicare for All, everybody has freedom of choice regarding the doctor, the hospital that you go to. Number two, we are going to expand Medicare benefits because right now, Medicare is a strong program. It is the most popular healthcare program in America, but it has problems. And the problems are, if you are a senior, it does not cover dental care, it does not cover hearing aids, and it does not cover eyeglasses. And those are expensive needs for seniors. We expand Medicare to cover dental care, hearing aids, and eyeglasses. All right? I'm told, well, this transition will be so complicated, so difficult, so disruptive of American healthcare. That is nonsense. I want you all to remember that back in 1965, under Lyndon Johnson and a Democratic Congress, they did the right thing. They passed Medicare and they passed Medicaid. So they had to develop an entirely new program. And by the way, what we have learned since is the Johnson administration hoped to expand Medicare for seniors to the whole population, which is what we are trying to do right now. Now, they did this in 1965 with nowhere near the technology that we have right now. So out of nowhere, in the first year, they signed up 19 million senior citizens into Medicare. All that we are trying to do in the year 2020 is over a 4-year period, expand Medicare. First year, we lower Medicare eligibility, which is now at 65, down to 55. Do you know any folks who are 60, 62 who would love to get into Medicare today? Yeah, there's one right there. All over the country. People can't wait till they're eligible. Well, for the first year, we do two things. We lower it to 55. Millions of people are finally going to be able to get into Medicare. And second of all, we expand benefits and we cover all of the children. Second year, we go from 55 down to 45. Third year, 45 down to 35. And fourth year, we cover every man, woman, and child in this country. This is not difficult. This is not complicated. This is not disruptive. And that is exactly what we have to do. Now, there's another lie and distortion that is thrown at us. But say, well, it's going to be so expensive So let's deal with that for a moment. Right now, as I mentioned earlier, we spend twice as much per capita on healthcare. We're almost spending about $11,000 per person. Family of 4, husband, wife, 2 kids, they're spending, the cost of their healthcare is $28,000 a year. You believe that? All right. So right now, you got working class people all over this country. How are they paying for healthcare? Well, they're paying premiums every month, right? They're paying $500, they're paying $1,000, whatever they're paying. Okay? And then they got large deductibles, which means that they're going to have to pay out of their own pocket, right? And they have to pay a fortune for prescription drugs, and then they got co-payments that they're paying as well. You add that up, and your average working class person is spending a hell of a lot of money for healthcare in this country.
Yes.
And under Medicare for All, the overwhelming majority of the American people will be paying less for health care than they do today. Because there will not be any out-of-pocket expenses, there will no longer be deductibles, there will no longer be co-payments, there will no longer be premiums. Oh, Bernie, this is radical, this is utopian. No, it is not. This exists in many countries around the rest of the world, including our neighbors to the north in Canada. I was up in Canada a couple of years ago. They were very nice up there in Toronto. I went to a hospital, and they were kind enough to take me into some rooms. And what I'll never forget, talking to doctors and patients, walked into a room, and the person said, I can't remember what they had, major surgery. And they said, look, you know, I have to spend all of my energy now trying to get well. I've had major surgery, and it's difficult, and I got to get back on my feet. But what I have here in Canada that my friends in the United States don't have is all I got to do, which is more than enough, is worry about how I get well again. I don't have to worry about the financial impact that this surgery has had on my family. What a load off of my back. And I talked to the doctors up there, and they said, look, we provide the health care that our patients need, not what the insurance companies will allow us to provide. And by the way, there is a reason why so many doctors and nurses now support Medicare for All, and that is because they are sick and tired of having listened and to fight with the insurance companies as to what they can do for their patients. They want to practice the best medicine they can for their patients, not argue with insurance companies. And you got a lot of doctors who are getting very frustrated about that whole process. So, bottom line is, this is not a debate over healthcare policy. A Medicare for All system which guarantees healthcare to all people, which saves the vast majority of the American people substantial sums on their bill, which provides comprehensive care for all of your healthcare needs. No one can argue rationally that the current system is better than that. What the real argument is about is an understanding that over the last several decades, the healthcare industry has spent billions of dollars on lobbying and campaign contributions. And the question is, can we take them on? They're going to be bombarding the airwaves with 30-second ads. They'll have lobbyists all over Washington. Drug companies will be intimidating the American people. And I think at the end of the day, that is the struggle, and it is a struggle that if we stand together, we can win, and we must win. Now, you know, we have talked about great struggles in this country over the last 100 years. 100 years ago today, women did not have the right to vote. Women stood up and fought back. 100 years ago, we didn't have strong trade unions in this country. Workers came together, stood up, and fought back. 100 years ago, we had segregation and racism, rampant racism all over this country. African Americans and their white allies came together, stood up, and fought back. Gay community stood up and fought back. And right now, when you talk about human rights, I happen to believe that the right to go to a doctor when you're sick, the right not to die, the right to be able to afford the prescription drugs you need, the right not to go bankrupt, that is a human right, and that is the struggle of the moment, and if we stand together, we're going to win that struggle. want to do now is I want to ask you a question, and then you'll ask me questions. And the question that I want to ask you is a question you don't see discussed on TV. And that's a whole other issue, what you see on TV and what you don't see on TV. But in your perception, not my words, tell me what you think. What's going on in Iowa? What is going on in the country? How do we feel about the way we treat our children? How do we feel about the way we treat our elderly? How do we feel about the way we're treating working people? Right now in America, as all of you know, and you heard some of those comments from Wade and Deborah and Susan who preceded me, half the people in this country are living paycheck to paycheck. You don't know? I grew up in a family that lived paycheck to paycheck, so I know a little bit about that. Why does that go on? So let me open it up to you. I want you to tell me what you think. Here in Iowa, we can talk about agriculture, we can talk about the economy, talk about children, seniors, healthcare, whatever you want. Okay, what do you think? Don't be shy. What's your perception? First person is always the greatest. Yes, ma'am, got a question. Just give us your name and go through.
I'm Barb Caldwell, a family farmer from Adair County, Iowa.
And Barbara and I were together yesterday morning.
Yes, we were. And we were looking over the agriculture in the state of Iowa.
And one of the things that we talked about was that Iowa is emptying out, rural Iowa is emptying out. We see it in our small towns.
Yes.
We see it with the businesses that were in our small towns. We see it in, farmer got some welfare. I got one from Mr. Trump, and that bought one bag of seed corn. So you can see that those are not ways to keep farmers farming. Insurance doesn't either. It helps, and it kind of keeps you going, but it isn't the answer. And so I
You
wonder.
want a decent price for your product.
Right. And so I wondered what your answer was.
I'll get to that, hang on. I want to deal with that. Bob raised a very important issue, and I want you to know it's not just Iowa, it's Vermont. It is all over rural America. We are seeing counties depopulating. We are seeing kids leaving the communities that they grew up in because there are no decent jobs. We're seeing rural hospitals closing down. So Barb, stay on that. I'm going to get back to you with some thoughts. But I want to, all right, let's talk about rural America, rural Iowa. What's going on? Bob, right? Yeah, woman right back. Yes.
Okay.
Dan, let's give us your.
Hi, my name is Catherine Gilbel and I'm from Messina, Iowa. And I'm just thrilled to be here because you're 35 miles away from my house and it's a real opportunity for me. And I will tell you that unless you experience what it's like to live in Iowa, you won't know that when you're traveling on the highway and it's either dawn or dusk, there are deer that come out of nowhere and you're in fear for your life that you're going to get in a wreck. And the body shops are busy fixing cars. And what the problem is we have too much deer. We need to bring the wolf back. We need to have a balance of nature here. There are too much corn, not enough trees. We need to save our environment. It's great to have, I love you for wanting to raise the minimum wage. I mean, I think that's a really strong point. People need to have a decent life and they shouldn't be working for peanuts.
And by the way, the minimum wage here is still what, $7.25 an hour? Is that
Right.
Yeah. Do we know people, Catherine, who are working for $8, $9 an hour?
In my town, there are so many poor people.
Who are working?
Yes, and it's really hard, and especially where I live, I have to drive 25 miles to the grocery store.
Wow.
So that's an expense, and it's wear and tear on your car, you have to go to a mechanic. You have to plan a trip to get what you need. There's a little grocery store in my town, which I try to shop there, even though it's more expensive, to keep it open.
Okay, let me interrupt you because I want to get to other people as well. All right, Barbara and Catherine talk about rural Iowa. And again, this is not just an Iowa issue. Do we have jobs in the area that are now paying people the living wage? Sir, your name please?
My name's Willard Olson, and I live in Greenfield. And first of all, Senator Sanders, thank you so much for coming to the birthplace of one of the most important Iowans in history.
Yes.
I'm honored by making that choice.
Thank you.
My question goes back to the health insurance issue that you just explained so well. And now I understand the Medicare for all, and I really didn't. And your explanation was excellent. My concern is that I just read in the Monmouth poll that polled Iowa Democrats, and in that poll revealed that 75% of Iowa Democrats did not favor Medicare for all. That's what that poll said to me.
Well,
And 56% suggested that they wanted Medicare with a private option. Now, if it's not resonating, I get it, and you've done a great job. How do we
let me
get
just
that
say,
message
don't
across?
put all your faith in that particular poll, which was wrong in many respects, by the way. All right, it's way out of touch with what other polls are showing us. I will show you poll after poll after poll where a majority of the American people, an overwhelming majority of Democrats support Medicare for all.
I'm
So
glad to
don't
hear
worry about that poll. That poll is, I think, not one of the best done polls. But we are, the answer is, and the reason I think the industry is getting so nervous is because more and more people understand that Medicare is a good program. It is a popular program. And what the American people want to do is expand it to people who are under 65. And that's what we do over a 4-year period. And that is exactly what the polls show. And I'm going to run on Medicare for all, and you know what? I'm going to win. And right there. Give us your name, please. The mic is on its head.
My name is Marcia Mazur, and I am Jess's mother. Just anyway, but I just wanted to say that I have an issue with factory farms
Good.
and in the environment, and I know Barb is a big fighter for that as well. And we don't want to see more factory farms. We don't want our water any worse. We want it better. And our water is terrible.
Okay. Well, let me just combine your question with Bob. All right, let me respond. I'm going to ask you a question and I'll respond. How bad is, you got water problems around here?
Yes.
Okay.
You can't swim in any of the lakes anymore. And you have algae blooms all the time.
Okay. And we think this is from the runoffs of the factory pump?
And then also
Okay. Look, I believe that for a start, we certainly need a moratorium on factory farms. That's the... And I'll tell you what else I think we need. I think we need to give local communities the decision-making power as to whether or not they want these factory farms. And I think also that as a nation, what we have got to do is end the kinds of corporate conglomeration that we are seeing in agribusiness, where a small number of corporations control whether it is poultry, whether it is pork, whether it is beef, whatever it may be. And we need an attorney general who understands antitrust law, which protects consumers and farmers. And the other thing that we need to do is in Washington, as all of you know, the significantly high percentage of federal subsidies do not go to help family-based agriculture, but they go to help corporate-based agriculture. And that has got to be changed fundamentally. I live in a state, the state of Vermont, and it breaks my heart and the heart of the people of Vermont, where every week we see another family farmer go out of business. We're mostly dairy in Vermont. People whose families have owned that farms for generations. People have lived good lives on those farms. So the issue that we have to deal with right now is how do we protect family-based agriculture? What do we do to do that? How do we say no to factory farming, which has done so much harm to our environment, to our air? People are living in communities where it's hard to breathe the air because it smells so badly, where our water is being polluted, and where, in fact, as property values are going down because people don't want to live in those communities anymore. So I think we have to stand up to agribusiness, we have to stand up to factory-based agriculture, and we got to put our heads together and figure out how we can rebuild family-based agriculture and keep our kids, those who want it, on the farm where they're earning a decent living. That's the challenge that we face. Okay, sir, yeah.
I just wanted to say,
Let's get to a mic there, sir.
yes, Daniel Turner. Daniel in ancient Hebrew means God is judge, and my wife's name is Deborah, and in ancient Hebrew that means honeybee, and she's my real honeybee because you know how important honeybees are to survival on the planet. And globally, yes. And I often say equal pay for men and women, let's lower men's wages.
I would think we want to raise women's wages.
And it wakes people up and, I couldn't get by on lumber. But what I wanted to say, in 1937, I saw when I was a little kid, in 1937, I wasn't, but I mean in the early 50s, and I wasn't scared of communism and all this and that because I didn't think it would work, you know. And, but I was scared, you know, Hitler, how did he get in, you know? I saw this movie that was in 1937, and you had to listen to the radio to hear Hitler talking, and if you listen to any other station, you could get put in a prison camp. And it's all about the media, and, you know, think outside the box. And we're getting a lot of biased information. I think a little bit of socialism down at the bottom, not going to communism, but, okay, from a Christian point of view, Jesus said, as you've done unto the least of these, you've done unto me. Okay, so it balances all. I'm not talking religion, I'm talking about equality. And the point being that we've got to be careful because there's so much baloney news coming on. And we need to search out the truth because it's killing us.
I'm going to stop you there for a second. You raised an issue, I want to get there. Okay, you raised a good issue. All right, talk to me about, your first name is Dan?
Daniel.
Daniel. All right, Daniel talks about media. I happen not to agree with Trump that the media is the enemy of the people. That is an outrageous.
Oh, not the open
It
media.
undermines American democracy, that media is fake news. But what about media? What about people have thoughts on it or not?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Hi, Senator Sanders. My name is Kimberly Graham, and I just want to say thank you. I'm running for the United States Senate to replace Joni Ernst. And I just want to thank you because for all the years that you have stood up for what's right, you have made it possible for people like me to stand up on our principles and run on a truly progressive platform. So thank you.
Thank you. Word on media in general, sir.
Yeah, Bernie, I'd like to, if you don't mind, ask you to propose an amendment because I'm sick and tired of you being left out of the polls and all this little innuendo, backstabs and jabs from all the talking heads on all the channels, progressive channels, all of them, they're corporations. And what I would like you to do is propose an amendment to take the freedom of press away from the private sector back to the government, the United States American people's government, where it belongs to begin with, so that they cannot manipulate us the way they are doing it now.
Well, I don't know that I'll support that. I'll tell you what, we got to be fair. We have a authoritarian type president right now who does not believe in our Constitution, who is trying to intimidate the media and so forth and so on. That's not what we do. But I think what we have to be concerned about in terms of media is that you have a small number of very, very large corporate interests who control a lot of what the people in this country see, hear, and read.
The megaphone.
Yeah, and you know, they have their agenda. That's what they are.
I have mine.
That's right. And so, you know, I think what we are trying to do in our campaign is to, and I hope people go to our social media. We are very active on social media, and we try to speak directly to the American people, because sometimes we have a very hard time getting through the corporate media. That's the national media. I must say that I find local media, you know, much more straightforward about it. You talk about things they often printed, but that is not the case with national. Yeah, ma'am, right up there. Yes.
Hello, I'm Teresa Arts, and I'm from Preston. A year ago yesterday, I had open heart surgery, triple bypass, and a valve replacement, and I, thank God, was on Medicare. I have never received a bill. Also, a year and a half ago, I was having trouble making payments for my insulin, and I could not find anybody to help me get my insulin. I've been a diabetic for 30 years. Luckily, my body still makes just a little bit. And I even tried the cheap stuff from Walmart and I was allergic to it. So a year and a half ago, I went off insulin. It's a real struggle to keep my blood sugars down. I pretty much live on salads. But I want to know how we can combat Big Pharma.
Okay, I'll tell you exactly.
I know this lady, she's talking the truth.
I mean, here you have an example. I'm sorry, your first name is ma'am?
Teresa.
Teresa? We don't have to go any further than just listen to Teresa. This is a woman, first of all, had a good experience, if you like. Heart surgery is not particularly a good experience. But at least you didn't get a bill, right? Because of what Medicare is about. And that's what I want to see for every person in this country. But on the other hand, what Teresa tells us, and this is unbelievable, you are living in the wealthiest country in the history of the world.
Yes.
Teresa stands up and tells us she has diabetes and she cannot afford the insulin which she desperately needs. And the answer is, as I mentioned a moment ago, 7.5 million people in this country use insulin. 1/4 of the people are rationing insulin, which is detrimental to their health. And we pay 10 times more than the Canadians do for the insulin that people use. So how do you deal with this? Well, first of all, on the Medicare for all, nobody will be paying more than $200. There'll be a cap on prescription drug costs of $200 a year. Now, how do we do that? Because we will lower prescription drug prices in this country, and you do that through a number of ways. What the Canadians do, which is pretty good, and they're improving their system, what they do is they look at the average that other countries are paying, and they say to the drug companies, sorry, you can't pay any more in Canada. We've got to do the same. So if insulin around the world is sold for 1/10 of the price that it's sold in the United States, that's what will be sold here. Number two, you have Medicare. Finally, we will have Medicare for all, negotiating drug prices with the industry, not allowing them to do what they currently do, which is charge us any price in the world. Thirdly, we will allow pharmacists and prescription drug distributors to re-import medicine from Canada that's FDA approved right into this country, which will substantially lower prices. So we lower prices, and then we have a cap of $200 on the Medicare for all that anyone can spend for prescription drugs. That's how we deal with that issue. Okay. Few more questions. Sure.
My name is Lenny. Thank you for taking my questions, Senator. There are a number of things that keep drug prices up, of which the U.S. government plays a part in that. For example, under the Trade Agreements Act, Customs and Border Protection decides what's an American product and what is not, and what, for pharmaceutical products, American products come in. The rule that they use to interpret that, where they place an emphasis on the origin of the API, the active pharmaceutical ingredient, artificially reduces competition and inflates prices. There is something that could be done without congressional act. It's not statutory, it's not regulatory, it can be done simply by shining a spotlight on it. One more thing. When the U.S. government buys pharmaceuticals, sometimes what they do is they'll award a contract to a repackager like Golden State, in which the NDC, the National Drug Code of the manufacturer, becomes invisible because the repackager puts on a new NDC. So the repackager can actually sell that NDC at a higher price than the former one. So there are a number of things. I'd be glad to provide information to your staff.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Give me a few minutes after.
Thank you. Okay, let's take a couple more questions. I see a gentleman way in the back there.
Thank you for coming to Iowa. My question is this. I'm part of the generation that really has been defined by the Great Recession in terms of entering the job market. Tons of job instability, a lot of contractual positions, which I think the previous speaker, or one of the previous speakers, commented on. Since then I've returned to grad school, getting my master's, so I totally support your progressive policies in terms of wiping out student debt, making school and university much more affordable and accessible for everyone. My concern is getting this through the Senate which is controlled by McConnell. And he is vowed to make, the Senate a legislative graveyard for any progressive policies. Any comments or responses about that? Thank you.
Well, two things. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that Mitch McConnell is not the majority leader of the United States. And I think we have a shot to do that. I mean, you look at the issues that McConnell is not bringing to the floor, and I'll tell you something before. When you are the majority leader, you can vote any way you want. If you don't like a piece of legislation, you can vote against it. You gotta go home and explain it to your constituents. But you really don't have the right to deny the American people votes on incredibly important issues. All of you are aware of the terrible, terrible mass killings that we have seen recently in Dayton and El Paso, and we've seen so often in the last couple of years. And the American people do want us to move aggressively forward in what we call common sense gun safety legislation. Overwhelmingly. The American people know we have to expand background checks. People who should not own a gun must not own a gun. American people know we have to do away with the gun show loophole, that we have to do away with the so-called straw man provision, where you could walk into a gun store and legally buy guns, then you sell it to criminals. And increasingly, and in my view, correctly, the American people believe we should put a ban on the sale and distribution of assault weapons in this country, which are weapons of military weapons. Now, people may agree, people may not agree, all right? But the point is, this is a crisis in America. Gun safety and mass killings are a real crisis. The American people want that debate. Now, if Mitch McConnell wants to vote for the NRA and against gun safety legislation, he has the right to do that. But he must, and I urge him to bring the Senate back so we can debate and vote on these issues. I'll give you another example. Robert Mueller, when he testified, made the point that the Russians, among others, are still trying to sabotage our elections. I don't care what your political position is. I would hope that everybody in America wants to make sure their vote counts, all right? And that you don't have it distorted by people who do not wish us well, in this case the Russians. So there's common sense legislation out there to work aggressively to prevent Russia and any other country from undermining our democratic elections. McConnell will not bring that bill up to the floor. The House, as I mentioned a moment ago, voted to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. My legislation does that in the Senate. McConnell will not bring that legislation. So what you got is a senator there who works on behalf of powerful special interests, and he's ignoring the people of his own state and ignoring the working people of this country. And we're going to do our best to make sure that Mr. McConnell does not return to the United States Senate. See a question right here. Yes. Okay, maybe one question after that. Yeah. Diane, hold that mic right to your mouth.
I'm Diane Huffman from Preston, Iowa. My father's 101 years old with dementia. He's World War II vet. He worked hard his whole life, 6 days a week, until he retired. He thought he was in good shape. Now he's in memory care at a cost of $7,000 a month, $250 a day. We just paid another $700 on top of that for teeth, which he still eats, you know. In a year, he'll have gone through everything he saved. We have been told that 2 months before the end, that we should get a hold of the government for a big Title 19 is what it's called. And I tell you, I'm thankful he has dementia, because this would just kill him to think he wouldn't need to go, he would call it welfare. And so I just wanted to, I know there's people here close to this.
Diane, I want to correct you on one thing. Let me finish. Here is a man who fought in World War II. So he put his life on the line and he suffered to protect the American people. Whatever he gets, it's not welfare. This, and we got to get, and I know in Vermont many people feel this is way. In a democratic, civilized society, what we want to do and must do is protect vulnerable people. If your dad is 101 years of age, he is vulnerable. It is, don't use the word disparagement. Medicare is not welfare. You pay into it. Social Security is not welfare. All right? This is what you are entitled to as an American citizen. And for somebody who helped defend this country, he is more entitled to it than anybody else. Please do not think that you're taking something that you don't deserve. I'll tell you people who are taking things they don't deserve. When billionaires get huge tax breaks and don't pay a nickel in federal taxes, that's corporate welfare. When Donald Trump himself got huge amounts of federal subsidies for his real estate business, that's welfare. But for ordinary people to get the help they need to live a dignified life, and certainly at the age of 101, you're entitled to that. But I'll tell you, you're touching on something else though, if I may. And two issues. Number one, and this is certainly not true for every elderly person, but there are a lot of older folks who do not want to go into a nursing home, who would like to stay home, but they need assistance with home health. They need somebody to come to the house and make the cook for them, make the beds, to do what has to be done. Under Medicare for All, by the way, we cover home health visits so that people will be able to stay in the home. The other issue, I think that Diane, if I understand it correctly, is talking about, this is another very serious issue in this country. Nursing home care is very expensive, correct? Okay. And what goes on right now is a significant, I think it's 2/3, don't quote, a significant percentage of people in nursing homes have that care paid for through Medicaid. But in order to get Medicaid, maybe this is what we're talking about, you have to deplete your life savings. That's right. So here you have somebody who's worked, in this case his whole life, wants to leave a little bit of money maybe to his kids and his family. But to get into a nursing home and get Medicaid, you have to deplete much of your life savings. And I think that's wrong. And I think that's an issue we have to deal with. It is a real tragedy. I think this is what you're expressing. And you're saying that you're happy that he doesn't even understand what's going on. But people should not have to, they work their whole lives, they want to leave a little something for their kids. They should not have to deplete all of their savings. So that's an issue we got to work on.
Can I say one?
All right, let me.
One more thing. That's
All right, let me get the people. One last question. Somebody wants to ask the question here. You have a question right back here. Okay.
Thaddeus Hawley, Adair County Chair of the Democratic Party.
Hey.
I want to thank you. Because of you in 2016 telling everybody they need to get involved and stuff, that I am here now. And,
good.
Actually, I'm actually going to be receiving an award this year for Best New Outstanding Democrat.
Good.
That's to speak to how important it is to get involved in your local politics and how anybody can run for office and anybody can be mayor or senator or anything. And just please get involved and reach out to me in Adair County. Thank you.
Can I say one thing? There's so many people that tell me that my vote doesn't count. That's why I don't vote. I need more people to vote.
Okay. Let me just. Your first name is
Thaddeus.
Thaddeus. Thaddeus made maybe the most important point of the day, and that is what my Republican colleagues want to see happen is that billionaires are able to continue to buy elections. So they love, Mitch McConnell, who you mentioned, was one of the prime movers of Citizens United to make it easier for billionaires to buy elections. He loves the idea of the wealthiest people in this country contributing hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. And the other thing that they are trying to do is voter suppression.
Yes.
All over the country, they are trying to make it harder for young people, for people of color, to participate in the political process. And we're going to take them on in both sides, both ways, because we believe exactly the opposite. We believe that billionaires should not be able to buy elections. We believe in one person, one vote. And the other thing that we believe, we should make it easier for people to participate in elections, not harder. Now, the way we are going to beat Donald Trump, and this is, I think, Thaddeus's point, is they have endless supplies of money, and they're going to work on voter suppression. The way we win is when ordinary people understand that for the future of their own lives and the future of this country and the future of the planet, you cannot sit it out. You cannot sit it out. Not for yourselves, more importantly, not for your children and your grandchildren. All right? If we do not take bold and aggressive steps to transform our energy system, the world that our kids and our grandchildren will be growing up in will be increasingly unhealthy and uninhabitable. And we have a moral responsibility not to allow that to happen. All right, but it's not just climate change. It's the very essence of democracy which Trump is threatening. The antidote to what Trump stands for is for millions and millions of people to get involved in the political process in a way that we have never seen before. Thaddeus mentioned, I'm very proud. In 2016, when I ran, I said to everyone, looked out in the room, you can do it. You can run for office. You can run for, city council. You can run for school board. You can run for Congress. You can do it. Believe me. If you think you don't know enough about the issues that we face, visit with some of my friends in the United States Senate. So, it is just, speak from your heart. And what you don't know, you'll learn. But we cannot be intimidated from running for office, and we certainly cannot be intimidated from voting and getting involved in every way.
Yes.
All right, on that note, let me thank you. It's a great turnout in such a small town, and I so much appreciate all of you being here. And let me just, as Thaddeus just said, let us all get involved in the political process. Let us defeat the most dangerous president in the modern history of this country. And then, after we are inaugurated, and I'll invite you to the inauguration, let us go forward and create a nation that is worthy of its people. Thank you all very much.